Hello everybody. In this video we're going to take a look at creating a Playblast. Now a Playblast is simply a video file. It's a render, but it's not really a high quality render. It's more of a working render. It's intended uh, for using so that you can see what the motion and what the animation looks like in your Maya scene before you commit to doing a high quality render. Um, One of the benefits of it is, sometimes when you look at the animation, when you just play it in Maya, what can happen is that it may need to skip frames. By creating a play blast, you know that you're going to be seeing every single frame. So let's get started. So the first thing I need to do is select the viewport that I want to create my Playblast in. And to do that, you simply need to click in the viewport. So I just clicked in the front viewport, and that means that this is the viewport that I will be creating my Playblast in. Now, I want to demonstrate something to you about the settings of Playblast, and to do that, I'm going to just drag this window down here like this, and I want you to take note of what you see here in this window. Perhaps I'll close the outliner so that you can see this a little bit better. Uh, this is what we're looking at here at the front viewport, and what I'm going to do to create my Playblast is simply go down to my timeline, right click in it, and select Playblast. And here you'll see my Playblast. It's finished creating the render, and as you can see, it took the setting from the actual size of my window in Maya. And we have this really long, uh, you know, video here, long in the sense of it's very long in the horizontal and very short on the vertical. Let's see what happens if I drag my window up like this, and I'll drag it over here like that. I'm still working in this window here, in my front window, and I create a Playblast of that. And once again, you'll see I get this weird aspect ratio here. Probably not what we want. So let's see how we can change that. So I'm still working in my front viewport here, and what I'm going to do is right click once again in the timeline, and I'll go to Playblast, but this time I'm going to open up the Playblast options by clicking on the box here. And here we can see a number of different settings, many of which I'll keep at their default. I'm going to keep the format as an AVI still. I'll keep the quality at 70. But what I want to change is the display size. Currently it says it's from window, meaning that whatever size my window is, that's how it's going to render it. But we're going to change that setting to from render settings, and that will take that'll take the image size from my render settings, and I'll show you where to change that in just a moment. I'm also going to take the scale and I'm going to increase that so that it renders it out at 100%. I'm going to tell it to save the file, and I'm going to tell it, obviously, where to save the file. I'll also give my Playblast a name. So we've set our Playblast render to from render settings. Let's just take a very quick look at where those render settings are. You can find them here with the clapboard with the gear on it. If I open that up, you'll see that I can set my image size here. We have a number of presets as well as the ability to manually put in whatever dimensions we want for the width and the height. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that if we look at the viewport here, we don't actually know where those borders are. So I'm going to click on this button here, which will show me not only the borders of my render, but will also indicate the render size here. And you can see I'm set to 960 by 540. And if we look in the render settings, you'll see it is also set to 960 by 540. If I were to change this, let's say to 640 by 480, you'll see that the composition will be different here. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go to my drop down and we will set it to, let's see, we'll set it to the HD 720. I'll render this out at HD 720, and I'll close. So now we're ready to create our Playblast render, and to do so, I'll simply hit apply. And here's my Playblast. Now, one thing I don't like about my Playblast right now is that I'm actually getting all of this area that gets masked out from a true render. I don't really want to have that in my Playblast. So let's take a look at how we can get rid of that. I'm going to close my Playblast. And if you remember, I enabled this here, this button here that allows me to see the render, uh, the borders of my render. Now, if I click on this button here, I can hide it so that we're not seeing it, but it's still going to keep those dimensions. It's still going to keep those borders for us in our Playblast. A couple other things that I might want to do, because a Playblast is going to look basically just like your working view here. I probably don't want this grid in my Playblast, so I'll click on this button here, which will hide the grid, and we'll go ahead and try another render. So once again, I'll right click into my timeline, go to Playblast, open up its settings. Perhaps we'll give this Playblast a different name. I'll save it. I'll keep all these other settings that I already set. Remember, we're doing it from render settings. And we'll apply. And now we get this render, which looks a little bit nicer, this Playblast here. I like that it doesn't have the grid in it, and also that it doesn't have the borders. We're not seeing the borders here, it just rendered it all the way to the borders. We'll go through the process one more time just to make sure that it's perfectly clear. But this time we'll go ahead and create a render from our perspective window. So what I'm going to do is turn off the grid. I don't want that in my render. We'll take a look at the borders of my render here and make sure, as I scrub through the timeline, that nothing is getting cut out from it. And I'm thinking that's looking pretty good. So now that we've determined that, I'll go ahead and hide that again. This is my current window that I'm working in, so this is the one that it will do the Playblast in. If I want to be absolutely 100% sure about that, of course I could just maximize that viewport. The other thing I'll show you, because I think it might make this Playblast look a little nicer. Remember that these Playblasts are actually showing you more or less what your working view in Maya looks like. This is not a high quality render. But despite that, we can still make this render look a little nicer. And what I'm thinking is I'll change the background color here in my viewport. And the way I can do that is by going to Windows, Settings Preferences, Color Settings. And I'm going to take my background color, and you can see I can change it to any color I want. I'm actually going to make the background color black. Save that. And I think we're ready now to create our Playblast. So I will right click in my timeline, go to Playblast, go to the settings. We'll make sure that everything is set properly. In this case, I have it as an AVI from render settings, scale at 1. I'm telling it to save to the file, and we're telling it where to actually save this Playblast. And we'll go ahead and apply. And here's my Playblast. A couple things before we wrap up this video. You may want to then, if you've changed the background in your working view, you may want to change that back. You probably will, in fact. So to do that, simply go back to Windows, Settings Preferences, Color Settings, Edit, and then Restore to Default. That will get your default gray background here. Again, if you want, because you're working then and you want to have the grid visible again, you can simply enable that as well right here. Here's my grid. One other thing I wanted to show you so that you can see something of the difference of, let's say, a Playblast, which again, as I stated, is not really a high quality render, but will certainly show you the movement, the animation that you have in Maya. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scrub in here to a frame. We can take a look at this frame. This is what it would look like if I did a Playblast in it. But if I did an actual proper render, which we'll take a look at now, you'll see that that's much nicer. I get the glow that I set in here. This is a better quality image here, and this is the image quality that we might get if we were to actually do a proper render of a video file, which I'll be covering in a future video. I hope that this has been helpful for you, and thank you for watching.